Good evening, everyone. We're going to jump straight in tonight. To everybody who is joining us out there, I know there's quite a few of you. First of all, a huge thank you for joining us on this first session with 360. So we're going to be doing a whole series through the summer and then into the autumn, and this is the first one, the Business of Rugby. So thank you all for joining us. Okay, so before we get started, we'll just do a little intro to all of our guest speakers tonight, all of whom are available through 360 speakers for your events. Okay, I'm going to start with Tom Foley. Obviously, this is the Business of Rugby. If you have any interest in the game at all, I'm sure that you'll recognize his name. He is one of, and I'm without exaggeration saying he is one of the most respected rugby officials around. He has officiated in over 48 tests. Tom, correct me if I'm wrong. 48 tests, 4 Champions Cup finals, 4 Premiership finals, over 200 matches, Premiership matches, and you were, of course, the TMO on the Rugby World Cup final last year. Does that all sound about right?
That's plenty, I think, yeah.
That's plenty. We'll stop there. Okay, Tom, thank you for joining us tonight. Sid Sutton, former CEO of Sale Sharks, who is widely accredited for having a big culture shift within the team. Is that right, Sid?
Accredited, I'm not sure, but that's what I give myself credit for.
Let's go with the word expected. That's what you did. You made a big mindset shift within that club. Well done. And Don Armand. So it's no secret that I'm a little bit of a Chiefs fan. And if you are too, you will recognize Don from his playing days there and also for playing for England. And you were, Don, am I right in saying the man of the match in the final, in the first Premiership final that the Chiefs got into at Twickenham?
Yeah.
Right? It was
Yeah,
indeed.
that's right.
Well done. We'll take that. All right, folks. So tonight we are going to be having a really relaxed fireside conversation. I've actually got the fire on in the background there. So really relaxed chat. We're going to do a deep dive into what it means to, first of all, be involved in the game and what lessons we can take from the game of rugby into business. Because Tom comes from things from an officiating point of view, Don as a player, and Sid as a leader, very well respected leader. So we've got different opinions going on here. We're going to open it up. We'll go 3 sections and then we'll open the floor up to questions afterwards. And we've got the lovely Alice here who's going to be feeding questions through afterwards. Okay, so let's open the conversation with talking about communication. Obviously, it is a huge subject, especially with sort of a lot of news stories going on at the moment, but the art of communication and decision making. And obviously, Tom, you're a man who has found yourself having to make very quick split-second decisions and communicate the reasons behind those decisions really quickly on quite a few occasions. Let's start with you and what communication means within the sport.
Evening, everybody. First of all, and obviously, thank you for joining. Yeah, I think that's a really big question, Tracey, to start with. I think,
of course.
I think coming at it from a sort of an officiating point of view, I think it fundamentally how you communicate a decision will predominantly sort of define how successful that is perceived to be. And as referees, we talk about you can make a really good decision appear really bad if you communicate it not very well, and you can make a pretty average decision appear to be very good if you communicate it in a really good way. So you know, we need to take people with us, and the way that we communicate will define whether people accept our decision or not, fundamentally, regardless of sometimes whether it's right or wrong. So the way in which that's communicated, the timing of it, and the language and everything else that comes with it is a real key part of what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Sid, is that resonating with you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think what's really powerful about the decision making within rugby is how they collectively make the decision. So how Tom in the centre of the park would sort of formulate an opinion about what other people think. I think that's critical. And I think that the way they do it is really, really important, but that how that is relayed then to the wider audience is also important as well. So they analyze the situation, they debate it here. Tom would take the decision or the information from the wider audience. They would collate that information, and then they'd regale it in a really sort of simple way. So that communication is broken down to the fans, so the fans can understand then the decision. Whether they agree with it is debatable or not, but you can't deny that the process is correct, which is really important.
I think a key part of it, Tracey, sorry, I think it's trying to understand who you're communicating for. And when we're communicating, we're communicating for such a range of different people. So obviously we're communicating for the players on the field. We're communicating for the coaches in their coaches box. But we're also communicating for the thousands of people in the stand, some of which can hear you, some of which can't. And then you're also obviously communicating for a TV or radio audience as well. And each of those groups, each of those stakeholders, if you like, require a different method of communication. And what Sid was saying there in terms of when we're making a decision, a lot of our communication strategy will be based on actually who do I need to communicate this decision for at this point. And I think that ties really nicely into the business world where you're going to communicate in different ways with different people at different times, and realizing and accepting that that's the need, I think, is really important. Absolutely.
Don, this must be resonating with you as well, having sort of left the game now, and you obviously started up your own business, haven't you? Is this sitting with you?
No, but it's when Tom was speaking, that's obviously thinking about from a player's perspective, what's the different styles that the different referees have, and how that transfers into, say, workforce. When you're firm, even if you're wrong, at least you're letting people know what your stance is, as opposed to someone that isn't firm and just blows the whistle without giving a proper explanation, leaves people hanging. So on the rugby field, if someone blows a penalty and they just say, not now, you leave the captain or whoever's asked a lot to wonder about. And it's not exactly that decision that gets talked about. It's that then how that affects the rest of the game, because the players start to make interpretations, and then they start to have interactions with the ref because they get more and more frustrated. Where if you see a ref that blows his whistle, says, this is how it is, that's why I blew it, done. At least the players, even if they disagree, they know where the ref stands and there's no interpretation. So if you take that out into the business world, obviously, even if you're wrong, because you're never going to be right to everyone, as long as you're clear and you have a stance, it lets people know what your line of, what you expect and how you expect it to be done. So yeah, I don't know if that resonates with Tom and how he picks up the different momentum and frustrations of players.
100%. I think the success of your relationship with players and with all the stakeholders that we talked about earlier on will fundamentally come down to how you communicate with them. And there are definitely times I've experienced where I've lost a captain because I haven't communicated effectively. And there are definitely times when a captain has lost me because they haven't perhaps communicated with me quite so well as well. And it's all about choosing the right way to communicate at the right time, trying to understand what people's motivations are, but yeah, that the way that you communicate and the way that you sell that decision will fundamentally dictate how successful your relationship is with the captain for the rest of the afternoon.
Tom, when that happens, and you feel obviously in that kind of pressured environment where you don't have time to stop and have a good old chinwag with them, if you feel you've lost the captain, is there anything you can do to bring them back during the course of the game, or is it a chat afterwards?
I think you've got to try and bring them back, because otherwise, that they've got the potential to make your afternoon quite a long one if you've lost them early on in the game. I think that's where knowing people and knowing how people tick, and when Don was a captain, he was always very eloquent and was always very approachable and pretty understanding most of the time. There's a couple of occasions where perhaps not, but we won't talk about those. No, but in all seriousness, I think I think you've got to know the individual and you've got to understand where their frustrations are coming from. And the times when we say not now is because we normally know that we've made a pretty naff decision, and we don't want to deal with it at that time, and we'll perhaps sometimes the communication then might turn to just a little bit of body language and just sort of giving them the nod as you run to the next line out and say, look, I'm as if to say, look, I get it, I'm sorry. And I think that humility, I think, is really important, and knowing that you're not going to get everything right, and accepting when you do inevitably get something wrong, and making sure that they're aware of it in the right way as well. You don't want to perhaps say, sorry, I got that wrong, but just the knowing look every now and again can be quite powerful.
Okay, nice. The body language, the eye contact. Okay, which actually is in some instances more important than the words themselves. It's what you're conveying via, the look, the body, the way you're holding yourself.
Yeah, coming back to what I said earlier, I think the success of a decision, if you deliver a decision really poorly with bad body language and no eye contact, then clearly that's a key method of communication, isn't it? And if you're doing that, you're not going to take people along with you. Whereas if you could make a pretty average decision and give it really sort of clearly and just be really sure about it, then actually people start to believe you a little bit more, and they accept it a little bit more. So I think that selling of it, that communication, whether it's verbal, whether it's non-verbal, I think it will fundamentally define your success.
Nice. And Tom, something you've spoken about before, just if we take you back to that World Cup final last year, and one of the things you talk about, whether it's the World Cup final or whether it was Chiefs last weekend or whatever, it's you mentioned about the understanding of the players and really getting to know them, and the people that you're working with, so that communication is that little bit easier. Is that right? I know you know your team really well, didn't you?
Yeah, so it's about knowing your team. It's about knowing the players. It's also sort of in terms of your prep, trying to understand what you're likely to see as well, so that when you are in a fast-paced environment, you've got an idea of what to expect, so that you're sort of 40-50% of the way through it before you even get to it, if that makes sense. So if we know that teams are going to play in a certain way, we can plan for that, and then that slows the game down a little bit in a strange sort of way. It gives us a little bit more time and a little bit more opportunity to make those decisions. In terms of knowing your team, I think that's your own team. I think that's the critical part of it. And going back to the World Cup final, the four of us had literally been around the world for the last 3 years together, 3 or 4 years together. We'd lived with each other in each other's pockets for that long, and the success of our team that day came down to knowing the individual one, better than we knew ourselves in some respects, so that I knew what Wayne was thinking as he was thinking it, and without him having to say anything. And a lot of that came down to his communication with me, but his non-verbal communication with me as well. I knew that he has a little tick that if he does that, he's a little bit unsure about something and he needs that reassurance. So little things like that can define whether you're successful or not as a team, I think.
Oh my gosh, thank you. And Sid, that reminds me of something. You've spoken really well and respectfully of Alec at Sale and his approach and how he was with his team. So what Tom's saying must be resonating with you there.
Yeah, you know what really resonates with me, just listen to Tom speaking then as well, and it's hit me before, but a light bulb moment for me is that, and I've just written it down actually, but all good leaders are really, really good at communicating. Whether you agree with them or not, they are just so articulate and they almost believe that decision, but they're really authentic and they're really passionate and they don't think about what they're saying, but they feel what they're saying. So all good leaders have got that ability to articulate themselves in a very confident way, which is really key, because you influence, you persuade people on that platform. And you link that back to Tom and the decision making within sports, and that and we often miss this, but in sport, that's that huge overlap of emotion of a decision going against them. Tom and the best referees in the world will have that ability to communicate that decision to, as Tom says, to all types of audience. And if you listen and you fairly rational about it, and even if you think the decision's gone against you, you can still understand that, and it somewhat dilutes the decision that's going against you because of the way it's been articulated to you. So as I say, all leadership. I think there's lots of skills within leadership, but to articulate yourself in a really compelling, confident, very clear way is absolutely critical.
Sid, sorry, so it was interesting there. I was going to ask you about, say, the business side of things, where you talk to leaders and you go, look, there's going to be some people that have the personality, so they want to see written, they want descriptive, they want bullet point understanding. That's how you'll clearly communicate. There's others that are the opposite. They want the language, they want simple terms. And then you go and you say, so when you have a conversation, you follow up with an email, that'll be very clear. And just when Tom was speaking there, I was like, yeah, of course. Or referees don't have, can I have a minute? I need to just calm down. They have to, that emotional control, the ability to like rely on knowing the rules, have a stance, all in the space of blow the whistle, speak, is such a good example of like immense pressure that you would never get in a workplace. Well, very rarely get in a workplace.
Sorry, you don't, but it's not only important for the game itself in that moment, but it's at rugby. Like we're all involved in rugby, and some decisions you still have no clue, because you're a spectator sitting in the stand. You still have no clue why that decision is going on, and still, even with the referee. So what is paramount, especially to grow the game, is to explain the rules, and that's even more pressure then on the referee to explain the rules of bloody rugby, because it is somewhat confusing sometimes, and to try and explain them to a different audience, to a younger audience, to grow the game, that's of paramount importance. So the referee's role is even more important with this split-second decision, as you say, Don, overlap with a huge amount of pressure and emotion, and then this, that you're going to upset somebody somewhere along the lines as well. So the only thing you can rely on, which is critical, but if you take this, as this whole thing is about, from sport into leadership, if you communicate in a real clear, consistent, precise way, then you'll take the majority of your audience or your staff with you.
Does that sound about right, Tom?
Yeah, definitely. And I think I think Sid said something really interesting there about how we're explaining stuff and during the game. And if you listen to the best referees in the world during the game, as the game is going on, they'll be talking, and they're not talking for themselves. They're not talking for the players. They're not talking for the coaches at that point. They're talking for the wider world, and they're explaining the rationale behind a decision, or what we'd call a non-decision. And what you find then is the TV commentators almost repeat it verbatim. You put words in their mouths, and it's a really powerful tool for us. And it's something that we work on really hard, is using those, filling that void after a decision or after a potential decision, and putting words in commentators' mouths, putting words in fans' mouths, putting the words in the people that sat at home on their sofa, and influencing them a little bit, and knowing the times. If you do that throughout the game, you're going to just get on people's nerves, but knowing when the opportunity is there, particularly around the more complicated ones, as Sid just said there, where nobody really knows what's gone on, to try and bring people along with you and trying to explain your rationale behind a decision. It sounds like we're just talking to ourselves. We're not. We're doing it to try and influence, the perception of our decision.
Tom, that's helped me enormously in the game, because some people ask me what's going on, and I've just heard a snippet, so I just repeat what you say and pretend I know.
I'll probably be wrong, but that doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter,
especially around scrums.
Especially around scrums, yeah.
Beautiful, Tom. Thank you. That's wrapped up communication for us for a moment. So we're going to move on now to Sid, and talking about culture and how you built, which is great to bring you on this as well, Don, because obviously the Chiefs did have a fantastic culture behind them. How do you build that culture of respect and accountability, Sid? Where do you start with it?
At the beginning. Where do you start? No, it's a lovely question, isn't it? You start. It's a really big topic, and I certainly won't, and I don't expect to do it any justice this evening. But you start with authenticity. You start with, what do we stand for? What do we pride ourselves upon? And you start with, not we as what leaders think, but what the whole staff think, what the whole environment thinks, what the whole entity, what the whole business thinks. What do we stand for? What are our values? What's our mission statement? What we're trying to strive for? One critical and most important thing is that when you're trying to do this, is that by asking questions, you're already showing something that's fundamentally important to building a good culture is collaboration. Because society, without getting too deep, but society, we've never been so connected, but so disconnected. So society and world problems and everything else, it's a little bit of a mess at the moment, let's be honest, but we can order a pizza and not even leave the house. So when do we have that interaction? When do we have a human interaction? And most humans want to be heard. All humans want to be heard. They want to be seen. They want to be valued. They want to have autonomy. They want to have this purpose, if you like. Most humans don't realize that's what they want. But if you can create that within a culture by asking people what they want and then valuing their opinions back, then you're starting to create a culture. It's really simple, really straightforward stuff. It's how you shape it, how you guide it, how you sort of put it into practice, which is the slightly tricky stuff, and how you change a culture that can be quite suppressive to expressive. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody's really valuable. We give everybody the opportunity to absolutely thrive. And that is so powerful. The difficult part is how we do it, because not only have we got this sort of economic society sort of limitations, we've all got our own limitations and we've all got our own limiting beliefs, and no, we can't do that, no, we can't do that. And it doesn't matter how many times you tell people. So you can't push that enough. And sometimes you, rather than, well, no, all the times, rather than tell, you've got to show. So as a culture, as a leader, you've got to show some vulnerability. So I don't know all the answers. I don't know, but let's have a collaboration and let's work it out ourselves.
What happens when you said you have to ask the question, what do you want? What if the individual doesn't quite know what they want or doesn't know how to express what they want? How do you?
This is a really, really important point. Often people don't know what they want. They don't. So often people won't know what their own values are. And sometimes, most of the times, your values will change throughout your life. So and you go a little bit deeper, then what's your intrinsic and extrinsic motivations? So extrinsic motivations are often deemed to be coercive behaviors by paying people higher bonuses, manipulative behavior to try and get them into a right mindset to perform for how your company won. It could be a Pizza Friday, it could be sort of bonuses, whatever. But if you start to understand that person, ask more questions and find out about their intrinsic motivations, so what drives them, what motivates them, what's their purpose? Is it their children? Is it I just want to do something for myself. I want to feel pride. I want to break down the limited beliefs because no one's told me. So what all of these sort of psychological questions, you could get to know the person better. That's the most important thing you can do as a leader. But you can't do that until you understand yourself a little bit more and ask yourself those questions. And there's there's loads of stuff out there that you'll be able to find on the internet without me sort of banging on, that you can sort of set the scene to understand your staff a little bit better. But if you set your own missions, your own values, your own sort of purpose for companies, which is absolutely critical to any business, then if you just ask that of your business, you've also got to ask it of the employees as well. So it just sets a nice sort of area to open up the doors to explore these things.
Okay. So the word or the phrase that we're looking for here is that psychological safety, creating that space of psychological safety so that people can open up, be vulnerable, all of that.
Sorry, Tracey, you're absolutely spot on. Yeah. By any leader showing vulnerability, I don't know, or I've been through X, Y, and Z. You're showing a vulnerability there. So you're not telling people to be vulnerable, but you're showing a vulnerability. That absolutely creates an environment for people to share with you. And that's what you want. Because that is then, there's no right, there's no wrong, but there is a business that's inextricably linked to people. And it doesn't matter whether you're in sport or out of sport, your business is only as good as your people. So how do you maximize the potential in your business? Is by creating an environment where you can maximize the potential of your people. And you can only do that by understanding your people better, by clearly communicating the vision, the strategy, and along the way, showing vulnerability, psychological safety, an environment for them to be heard, to be seen, everything that society doesn't often show at the moment, for them to flourish and absolutely thrive in the workplace. And once they do that, then you turn productivity into performance, into profitability. And it sounds very easy, doesn't it? But it's much more difficult than that. But that's the philosophy. That's and there's lots of threads off this, but that is the crux of the matter.
Beautiful. Don, I see you nodding away there.
Yeah, the whole time I didn't really have anything to add. Like it's very good points. I think, well, maybe one thing is just one difference I think that creates a good leader and someone that's a great leader is how they transfer pressure down. Because a lot of what Sid was saying there was the ability to give people space to get the best out of them. But as the pressure comes in from business performance, timelines, deadlines, the crowd, your losses, how much the leader can shield that so that he keeps giving the people space to get on board versus the one that lets that get on top of them, transfers that down, starts to put the pressure on, then all of a sudden all that goodwill, that psychological safety you've created goes out the window because now you've shown your true colors. And I think that's where the art comes in, because everyone can put that best foot forward and go, I want us to be aligned. I want us values to align. But actually what you got to watch is when people are really under pressure, how are they then? Because that's what the people remember in a month's time when the pressure is now off and you're now putting your best foot forward again. And I think that's an art that you can kind of really think about and learn, but experience is going to be the best teacher with that. So
beautiful. Because I've heard you say before, John, and you probably just said it there, is that true character is shown under pressure. That's when.
I think a better sentence that I've seen is at your highest times of pressure and stress, you fall onto your highest level of preparation. So preparation can insert into like how much you've practiced, what are your values, what's your character, because that's when you have your self-awareness goes out the window and suddenly you just crack into who you actually are. Okay. And that's why anyone that doubts self-development, essentially that's exactly what you're trying to prep up, is that ability to know where you're going to go when your stress is on, and you can work on that.
Okay, beautiful. And Tom, I think it's on your profile page on 360 Speakers, there is a quote from you that says, you don't rise, you don't, oh, good, help me out here, you don't.
I think Don's just paraphrased it completely. I think if he's stolen it from me, I'm gonna claim some royalties. No, yeah. So yeah, I think basically, yeah, you don't rise to an occasion. You fall to your level of preparation, and that preparation can be many things. It can be preparation, in from a sporting point of view for a game, but it's also your preparation for how you want to work as a person within a team, within a high performing team as well, and preparing that sort of growth mindset, creating an environment where people are able to perform and express themselves, whilst if you're the leader of that team, whilst being able to be accountable. That's the dichotomy that you've got to try and balance. And as Sid said, that's easier said than done.
Just it is easier said than done. I absolutely agree with everything. The one thing that when you get a little bit deeper into this, if you understand yourself better, great leadership is to understand yourself better so you can be the best you can be, so those around you can become the best they can be. And as Don and Tom have just said, under pressure, you just perform. So some people will think about it, or some people will just be it, and you don't think, you just feel it, and then then you perform the best under pressure because you've prepped it, you've built resilience. There's a huge amount of sort of work that's gone into this, but the fundamental difference is you're not thinking about anything. I would imagine when Tom And when Dom played at their best and done their best decisions, they're not thinking about it. They're just doing, they're feeling it from instinct. And if we can take that analogy out of sport into business, there's so many analogies, but because of the practice, the preparation, the sheer, Don and Tom have got to the pinnacles of their career because they've been fully committed. They've been like practice upon practice and practice. But I would imagine the most critical part of them becoming better is the ability to take feedback. So once you take feedback, and some of it might be from the public, some of it might be from outside, but the ability to take feedback and grow. And then once you're in that environment and you grow, then you'll start to like just relax into it and not think about it. And it's an opportunity to learn, and that you remove all the fear and you just start to sort of blossom and flourish in an energy of creativity, because you know you're going to get feedback and it's an opportunity to grow. So if you can address that as yourself as a leader and understand that and sort of lean into that a little bit more, it just becomes much more of a contented feeling to become a leader. And it doesn't matter what pressure's thrown at you. You've got a mindset, you're going to handle it, and that's it. That's your true colors, and you love it, you thrive in it.
I think it is definitely a mindset thing, and I think it's a mindset shift as well to expect pressure and to know that if you can prepare knowing that you are going to be under pressure at some point, and then you flip your mindset to be, well, that's where I'm going to thrive, that's where I'm going to show how good I can be. You actually thrive on that pressure. You look forward to that pressure, because that's when you perform at your best. You're in the groove. You're connected. You know, from an officiating point of view, you're really connected to the game. As a player, you know, you're not having to think about it. It's all coming instinctively. And when you accept that you're going to be under pressure at some point, and turn it around and say, well, actually, this is my opportunity to show why I'm here, and that's the opportunity why I'm stood in the middle of this field, and there are 30,000 people around me who aren't. Then that's when you start to perform at your very best.
Yeah.
Yes. We spoke last time about the idea of it being, well, the question, is it privilege or is it pressure?
It's easy. It's a privilege, and that's, I think, certainly the best people I've seen operate as players, as leaders, and as officials is they're the ones who, when the pressure comes on, you can actually see them go up a level, and that's an innate sort of instinctive thing to do. But I think it comes down to that change in mindset and just accepting that it is going to happen at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. Don, anything to add to that?
No, I like the privilege versus pressure thing, and it's sometimes you drift out of it, and I think that's people, like, you're never in one fixed state. You go from growth to fixed to growth to fixed in different situations, and I think the key in terms of preparation is reminding yourself when you feel the pressure, it's a privilege, and not being harsh on yourself that you buckle to feeling pressure. And that's, I think, I don't want to go too deep, and I keep saying it, is like, the awareness isn't trying to make a change. Awareness is just being aware of something, and just by being aware of it, you'll allow it to change on its own. I think that's a key differentiation.
Okay, perfect. I think we've actually moved very naturally into the next session here, which is leadership under pressure, but I think we might have covered it. Sid, if you're okay for me to do so, I want to jump back a little bit, because we've gone a bit forward, but I want to jump back into that building the culture and vulnerability. And something really important that you said was that to be able to lead, you first have to know yourself.
He did
Have you with me diving a little bit into that and asking what you had to do to understand who you are and how other leaders might have to do the same?
Yeah, without getting too deep. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's all briefly, otherwise fairly late, it's going dark and everybody be asleep by listening to my very boring story. But there is some light at the end of the tunnel. If I worked in the city for many years, and there was a huge amount of pressure, it was a toxic environment, it was everything I disliked. That gave me a opportunity to see, right, this is shit. Sorry, excuse me. This is crap. This is not very good. It's I believe I've got potential, but it's just suppressing everybody. And I spoke to lots and lots of people, the thousands of people in the company, and everybody felt the same. We're not, we're just being suppressed and being suppressed. We can't articulate ourselves. And that creates a lot of internal conflict. You never felt good enough. You were always a huge amount of pressure. 2013, long story short, I had to quit from covering Europe because I couldn't fly anymore. Huge state of anxiety, couldn't sort of operate, couldn't get on a plane, everything else. This is a lovely story. I don't want everybody to sort of feel sorry for me at all. But I didn't express myself to anybody because it was 10 years ago. So you didn't. I was a man. I was sort of a little lad from Wales that was feisty and everything else. I wasn't going to suffer mentally. Crikey, mate, so you couldn't do that. I certainly wasn't going to tell anybody. And I did suffer massively. And that led into testicular cancer, and it was a welcome relief. I got testicular cancer because I could talk about it. I could actually talk about it. I could say, right, okay, yeah, oh, you're poorly. Said, yeah, no, I got testicular cancer. Oh, crikey, no, it is a shame. It is a shame. I was extremely lucky, caught it early, nothing sort of untoward, very humbled, huge respect for all of the NHS, Christie's Hospital, everything else. And just the experience sitting in there, having chemotherapy with people next to you that were going to sort of pass away, it just changes your life. It absolutely changes your life for the better, And you think, and I do want to swear now, but I won't swear. But you think, for frig's sake, there is an opportunity here in the workplace that is so toxic and so shit that it's just allowing people to not only express themselves and develop and to flourish and to thrive that's best for them and for the business. There's an opportunity to change all of this, absolutely change all of it. So quit the role, do everything else. And then 10 years working for myself and investing in sort of leading businesses and helping businesses grow, all through the philosophy of saying, okay, how do we make the workplace better? What do we do? How do we sort of engage with one another? And this is, as I say, there's probably 15 years of experience now, 10 years of experience, asking a huge amount of questions and across a huge variety of businesses. But the one common goal is we all want to be treated as humans. So we all want to be heard. We all want to be seen. We all want to have this psychological safety. We all want these things, but there's a lack of trust in the workplace to express yourself because people say, yes, you can. You express yourself, and then you'll often get a shit, no, that's useless. That is it. That's not very good. Or somebody else will go against you. So there was all of this experience that you think, okay, it's got to be a better way, rather than me just telling it and then a light bulb moment. Okay, I need to show it. So if I show vulnerability in the workplace, and if I show people the small conversations matter and it's authentic, and I'm not going to get it right all the time, and I will still piss people off, and I will still annoy people, and I still get things wrong, then that's all part of being human. But my intention is correct. And we've got to work this in a collaborative way. We've got to have the same purpose, the same goal, the same sort of mission, and the same, not ideas, but the same empathetic view of one another. And if you get that in the workplace, that's when you will absolutely thrive. There's just no stopping it, because, yeah, without getting, again, too deep, you're only as good as your people. And there's a recent Gallup survey saying only 27% of the UK workforce is engaged in the workforce. The other 70% is either disengaged or actively disengaged. Disengaged is they're not doing anything. Actively disengaged, they're not only nicking your stationery, but they're screwing up your strategy because they're saying yes to you and they're going against it. And it's because we haven't communicated right. We haven't done all of these things. So that is it. In the probably felt 20 minutes to anybody else, but that's the story of the backdrop of me, really.
Thank you for sharing that. Tom, you're nodding away there.
Yeah, look, I think, I think what Sid has said there in terms of it's understanding the human element of it all, and that we are all human, and we forget that. We see people as We see people as machines. Sometimes we see them as tools. We see them as a means of getting a job done. And unfortunately, that's going, you're never going to get the best out of people. And it comes back to what we were saying earlier about how do you create that space for those people to be human. And that's firstly knowing yourself, knowing what triggers you, but it's also knowing what triggers them. And I remember just a little anecdote from me. It'll be a bit shorter than Sid's, but so everybody be pleased to hear. But the walking along the beach with one of the guys I was working with at international level in Melbourne once, and we were just two of us. We walked for about 4 hours, and we just talked about family. We talked about the stresses in our lives. We talked about how difficult it was being away and what that meant, and we found we actually had a huge amount in common, and we were going through exactly the same thing, but we weren't talking about it, and we weren't performing perhaps as well as we should have done because we had all this going on in the background. But then actually when we spoke about it, we thought, well, actually I'm not the only one going through all of this. This guy I've spent the last 3 weeks with is going through exactly the same thing, and it made us work better because when he was a bit abrupt with me, or when I could see that he didn't want to speak, or he wanted to go off on his own for a couple of hours later on that tour, I understood, and as a result you've got a far greater respect for each other, and it actually translated then into our working relationship. And this isn't to say you've got to go and be everybody's best mates and you've got to cry your eyes out to everybody that you work with, but you've just got to understand that people have got a lot going on, and that will impact on them, and that they are, work is only part of it. So how can you try and understand what makes them tick, and how can you bring that into the workplace? Because if you can bring that into the workplace, people are going to want to work for you.
Beautiful. So actually, it's the being open, the being vulnerable, the being honest that brings people closer to you and doesn't push them away. It doesn't isolate you. It strengthens that bond, the community, the relationship.
I think you just understand. It makes you understand what makes, as I said, what makes people tick, and makes you understand people on a slightly deeper level, on a human level, rather than on an employee level.
Yeah.
So I got a question just for Sid. I mean, a question for Sid on the back of all these things, because he's had the corporate experience. Because I've seen a points come up, because this is a very, like what Tom's just said, what Sid said about like getting to know your people, making sure you get the best out of them. It means you have to form a relationship. But I see far too often people going, the worst thing as a leader you can do is form close relationships with the people, because you only let them step over the mark. And when I read that, I'm like, I say, don't confuse your inability to direct things in the right way because you know your purpose with the fact that it's a friendship that's stopping you to do that. So, Sid, I suppose in your experience, because I know that some people are probably going to ask that question, is what are your thoughts when you see people saying don't form friendships, when on the other hand, you understand that in order to actually understand what's going on with the human, sometimes you're going to have to form some form of relationship, and it could be a level of friendship.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point actually, because I don't know, the four of us that are on here now have got some kind of friendship. So what's the definitive friendship? We've known one another for a short period of time. We've had several conversations together, but because we're speaking openly, there is a connection between the four of us. Is that defined as a friendship? I'm not sure whether I would define that as a friendship. As a leader, if you clearly, and it goes back to the first point, if you clearly communicate the expectations of the business, the vision, the strategy, and everything else, and showing that vulnerability and showing that human side to you, you don't have to form a friendship with 11,000 employees, but you definitely form a way to work with 11,000 employees, because you're, again, showing, not telling. And you can't tell people, because it's bullshit, old age, tell. People don't buy into that. But if they see you being vulnerable, if they see you sharing, if they see you doing all of these things and having the smallest conversations will have the biggest impact, then it's not forming 11,000 friendships, 1,160 friendships, but it's showing that it's okay. It's all right. We're humans. We don't know all the answers. It's great that we explore. We don't want to work under an energy of fear, because you'll never, ever, ever optimize human performance under an energy of fear. It's okay not to know, and it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to share. That these are really, truly a fundamental change to high performance in and out of the workplace. You get like Owen Farrell, George Ford, whomever players, they will not be working under an energy of fear on that rugby pitch. Ronaldo will not be working under an energy of fear. They'll be absolutely loving it, in the flow, mindset, positivity, wherever it may be. But there'll be no fear, there'll be no consequence, there'll be nothing. As soon as they get into that energy of fear and consequence, fear of failure, then their confidence will drop and their performance will drop. And you take that analogy directly into business, then you're curtailing people's potential. They're only going to work at a 5 out of 10. So hopefully that's asked your question. I digress a little at the end, but it's what you do, not what you say.
Yeah.
Perfect. Gentlemen, we're 45 minutes into this already. Thank you so much. We're going to move on to questions, because I've got loads coming through. Sorry, I've been looking, the chat hadn't been working for a while, so they've been coming through on my phone. So if it's okay with you guys, first of all, both Tom and Sid, thank you for showing that vulnerability and that little insight into challenges and tough times, because like you say, we are all human and we all have them. Don, we haven't had any challenges from you, but maybe we'll get some in a minute. Maybe yours was the marathon at the weekend, right?
Yeah.
Don's too good looking to have any sort of challenge, isn't he? It's just not, it's not fair.
Someone's paid you to be flattering tonight, sir.
It's that colouring you've got on your webcam. That's it.
Oh, amazing. Right, guys, we've got some questions. I'm looking at my phone here because Alice, thank you for sending these through. I think there are two here. I'm just going to quickly just check what we've got here. Right, Gareth Davies. Hi all, loved Tom's view on pressure and how he looks forward to it as he performs at his best. But what about the times when you bring the pressure on yourself? As a business owner myself, when I have made mistakes, it feels like a very different type of pressure. And well, the higher performance you are, the higher profile the mistake is. Also, how do you take mistakes professionally, not personally? That's for you, Tom.
So I think that's a really good question, isn't it? And fundamentally, when I make a mistake, it's fun. It's just a game. It's just a sport. And sometimes you've got to remind yourself of that. And obviously, there are ramifications with it. But I think one of the things which I feel quite strongly about here, Gareth, is we put pressure on ourselves when we're always trying to be right, when we think that we're going to always make the right decision. And I think the first bit is accepting that you're not going to get everything right. And as soon as you can sort of overcome that, I think every decision making becomes a little bit easier. We talked about chasing excellence and not chasing perfection, because what happens when you chase perfection is you just focus on the negatives. You get into this downward spiral. You can never achieve what you're setting out to do, because we're never going to be perfect. So if you accept that actually I'm just going to try and be excellent at everything, I'm going to try and improve those 1%, those David Brailsford 1% increments, and accept that I'm never going to be perfect. But what I will do is use those opportunities where I haven't been perfect to develop that growth mindset, and that's where I look forward. So I hope that answers the question. But I think, yeah, for me, it's about not chasing that perfection, accepting that you will make a mistake, and then using that opportunity to learn moving forward and utilize that growth mindset.
Nice. Which, and you heard it here first, is the title of one of your newest talks. Am I right?
Possibly. I've got to write it first.
That's right. All right. Sid, how do you handle disagreements within a team, especially in high pressure situations?
I don't. I'm always right. They're out. Do you know what? It's a great question. Again, I don't want to get too deep with this. It's conflict, isn't it? So any conflict takes two people, because you wouldn't have conflict else, and they both think they're right. So that's the nuts and cracks of it. You've got two people or two parties that both think they're right. Otherwise, there wouldn't be conflict. So if you break that down, it often comes down to emotion, and it often comes down to being human, and it often comes down to egos. We're never right. And this is linked back into Tom's question from Gareth as well. If we all sit around the desk and be real curious to understand why the other party is right, then we start to dissolve that conflict. But yeah, absolutely dissolve it. So you go in there with a curious mind, and you go in there with asking questions, and you go there but real curious mind to understand why this other person, that's really important, not subjects, why this other person is wrong, because they're human beings. They must have some kind of system rationale to their point. So let's sit and listen to it. And once you sit down there and you listen to it and you substantiate it, and you say it's good to have a debate, because you don't want to narrow it as a conflict, because it's all about setting the scene. You want to manage it as it's a growth mindset. It's debate. I want that debate to come to me. Otherwise, we're never going to grow. So it should be encouraged. It should be absolutely welcomed into a business to have this debate. And we sit down there and we position it really clearly that we understand one another's points of views, and we come to a collaborative approach, and then we go through it. And if we just still don't agree, then we just crack on and we support the other party. Absolutely sounds simple, but it's all about the positioning. It's so critical, because that's positioning right. And I'm conscious of my talking. And the only thing that I say to Gareth, and add into what Tom is saying, is that is all about setting the scene. That is all about, I don't know everything. So when you say, I don't know everything, it becomes less pressure if you do make a mistake within the business. And I know running a business, it does come with financial, family, everything else. But the only pressure or the biggest pressure you're putting upon yourself is in your head and in your mind, by the words you say and how you positioned yourself and how you collaborate with other people.
Nice. Perfect.
Shut up.
That leads nicely onto this one for Don. How do you ensure that every member of the team feels valued and heard within rugby and in business?
That's a good question. You listen to them. No, I think it genuinely is that. Sometimes it's part of that relationship thing that we've talked about earlier. Is if you're not making time for that relationship, you won't make time to let them be heard. And sometimes that's all people want. I think Sid may have said it earlier, is like that sometimes people just want to be heard. And as long as you're giving them the platform, then whatever issue that they would normally create in their head, whatever demon, whatever enemy is out there, then it's gone. And that's where we go back all the way to the beginning about communication. Is the ref that, like, if I was going to ask about football refs, blow the whistle, point the direction, foul. No words. Look at what the players do now. Surround him, like constantly trying to shout and get their way, and he doesn't say anything back because it's a zero tolerance policy. But actually, where rugby is slightly different is it's blow the whistle. This is why I did it. Then at least they've got an explanation, even if it's wrong. So I think how you make team members feel valued and heard is by giving them an opportunity to listen to them. And then at the core of any person is feeling appreciated. So the valued bit is appreciating them. And it doesn't have to be, here's a 500 quid bonus. It's going, I saw what you did there. That was awesome. And I think one step further, when you're complimenting someone, appreciating them, it's pointless complimenting someone by saying you're awesome. Or the compliment that we all realize is when you look at your spouse and you say you're beautiful, as a man to a woman, or however you like to compliment in whatever situation. But if the receiver doesn't think they're beautiful, that compliment will mean nothing. So it's actually saying, when I look at you, it makes me feel, and then you say, it makes me feel really grateful to have someone like you in my life because of how beautiful I think you are. Because what you've done is you've shown them what and who they are is valued in you. And I think that's a very key differentiation in making people feel appreciated, because if they don't think that what they're doing is is valued and you say, oh, I value this, they can be like, oh yeah, and we shrug it off. We all do that. Someone says you've done a great job. If you don't think you've done a great job, yeah, great, I'm glad you think that. But if you say you did such a good job because this is what it did for me, it's showing me how my actions have resulted in something you've done. And immediately I can't negate what you think and your experience. So I go, oh, that's good to know. And that's I think yeah, for me is key.
Damn, Don, someone trained you well.
I've read a book.
Yeah.
Nice.
I don't like Don.
But I think like if questions asked by the audience, it's like, give yourself a chance to know that you're not going to do that for the first year of being aware that that's what you should do. You're going to try and then go back to stress and pressure and lowest form of preparation. You'll forget it. And then you've got to remember again, you've got to keep trying, and eventually it starts to come right. That's how the mindset works, isn't it, too? So it's don't, just because it didn't work the first time or you forget, it doesn't mean it's not going to work in a year's time. You're trying to override like 30 years plus of learned behaviors and habits and communication.
God, that's a deep dive in this area. I'm really conscious we've got 4 minutes left, so I'm going to get one more question in here. Tom, we've got a question for you from Ian. He asked, what is your, do we have time to go here? What is his opinion on TMO? Is there a strong case for the TMO on rugby, as you are limited to camera angles and it's not always clear cut? You got 3 minutes.
Wow. I could talk all night on this. I think it comes down to what we want the TMO to be, and clearly we don't want a game which is refereed by a guy sat in a truck watching a load of TV screens, because that takes out significant amounts of all the human positivity that we've talked about already in terms of communication, in terms of building relationships and everything like that. What we want a TMO to do is to make sure that the big decisions, the big moments of a game are correct. And clearly, you look at football at the moment, they're going through a bit of a battle with VAR, which they're working through, and they're finding their own ways of dealing with that. In rugby, we're probably a little bit further along the line, and we are getting to a place where that process is getting more appropriate for the game. But what I do believe is, my view on this is that we need to see the TMO as more as a part of the team of four. So in the same way that an assistant referee can make a decision on a knock-on or something like that, what we've got to do for the credibility of the game is ensure that if everybody sat at home sees a knock-on and everybody on the field has missed it, why can't somebody who's part of that officiating team make that decision? Because it is fundamentally a decision that needs to be made. Now, clearly, your threshold for entering the game has to be really high. But I think by allowing that TMO to be part of the team of four, or more of a part of the team of four, which I think they will end up being as we move forward, you actually avoid more TMO referrals. You avoid formal reviews. You actually have fewer stoppages in the game, or fewer longer stoppages in the game, because you're working as a unit, you're working as a team, in order to get the clear and obvious decisions. So, like, that's a very brief sort of summary of where I see the TMO. I think sort of converse to what Ian has potentially said there. Part of the skill of the TMO, just very briefly, is picking what to ignore, because, as you say, there are so many cameras. It's knowing what you don't need to deal with is the skill of a good TMO. There's very little that you miss. World Cup final, you have 48 cameras. You're at danger of everything becoming clear and obvious. So I think it's getting people to buy into a process where they've got a real clear idea about what the threshold is for entering the game, and when they do enter the game, they do it in order to try and improve the game, not to make the game even more stop-start.
Yeah, perfect. That was 3 minutes exactly. Well done. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time this evening. Some real insight, some real vulnerability, and a real understanding, especially there from Tom. Thank you. And to everybody watching, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It was our first session. We will be hosting one every month with different themes that you're all very welcome And we're very grateful for you to having joined us. And Alice, thank you so much for feeding those questions through to me. That's brilliant. As I mentioned before, Tom, Don, and Sid are all available through 360 Speakers to come and show up at your events. Believe me, they all deliver some fantastic speeches and talks. And Don, you are off to Devon Scouts at the weekend, aren't you, to their leadership conference, probably talking about a lot of this. So good luck with that one. I'll see you there, actually. I'm going to pop up. Gentlemen, thank you. I wish you all well. I'm going to bring it to an end now. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Tracey.
Thank you all.
Good night,
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.